listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. It is so good to have you back on the Motherhood Experience podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce our guests, I just would like to ask you one more time if you would share this on Facebook or Instagram, share out the YouTube video link, and also if you wouldn't mind leaving us a 5-star rating where you listen to podcasts, that would surely help us out a ton. Today's guest is my friend Allison Pettis. Allison has 8 children. You will hear about her story managing a household of 10, homeschooling 8 children, and all of the things in between. She is a woman of wisdom and grace, and I can't wait to introduce you to my friend, Allison Pettis. All right. Well, I am here with the one and only Allison Pettis. Allison, thank you for joining me on the Motherhood Experience. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for asking me to do this.
You were one of the very first mothers I thought of and reached out to. And we have known each other for many years. I don't know how many. I think we knew about each other maybe before we actually...
I think so. I think it's been around 10 years.
Well, yeah, a little more than that, I think. Because I knew you before Harlan died, didn't I?
No, I had not met you yet.
Okay. So that was when we knew about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I knew that you were the mom that had all of the kids.
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of hard to miss.
So why don't we start with that then? I like for the episodes to kick off with the ages and stages of kids and where you are in motherhood. So why don't we run down the line for you?
Okay, I'll start with our oldest. Our oldest is 23. His name is Tim. Then we have a daughter, Olivia. She's 22. Andrea is our next daughter, 21. Adam is our son, who is 19. Krista is our daughter, who is 18. Marcy is our daughter, who is 17. David is our son, who is 15. And Luke is our youngest, who is 13.
And for those who lost count, you have
8 children.
8.
4 boys, 4 girls, all just under 10 and a half years.
Yeah.
No twins.
Yeah, that's amazing. And are you and your husband kids from large families? Or are you an anomaly?
I have one older brother, and my husband has 2 younger sisters. So 3 in his family, 2 in mine.
So are you the couple who broke the mold with your family size?
Let's see. Well, he and we have our 8 kids. My brother and his wife also have 8 kids. And my husband's 2 sisters have 2 kids and 3 kids. So is the mold broken? I don't know.
So when you started having children, were you just going to see what played out? Did you want to have a large family?
Yeah, that was kind of what we were thinking. We had discussed this before we had gotten married. Well, what do you think about kids? And I really always wanted to have a large family if God allowed that to happen. My parents had my brother, and then they had me. And my mom almost died in childbirth with my brother. Had a very hard delivery and recovery, and God raised her up miraculously, really off the deathbed after my brother was born. And then she had a miscarriage, and she had me after that, and she just said, I'm done. And they took steps to be done. But then the Lord really changed their hearts later, and they said, we wish that we would have been open to having more children. The Lord says they're a blessing, they're a gift. But they did take measures to reverse that surgery. But they never had any more children after that. She had a tubal pregnancy after that. And but that was one thing that was big in our family culture, was a love for children and being open to what they felt God was calling them to do with that. So I guess I always really wanted to be open to that. But, I didn't know if I could have kids. I've had a lot of friends who struggled with infertility, so you never know how that's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just going in with, well, what is God going to give us? And and trying to follow his leading with that. And people say now, well, are you done? I said, well, we don't know.
That is one thing that amazes me, that people ask that all the time. Like, what? First of all, that's a decision that's really no one's business, and could be controversial even in whether it's a decision that should
Yes.
be made or not.
Yes.
Second of all, what's it to you?
Yeah.
You're not raising
And I
these
really
kids.
think that. I think, I don't think anyone can make that decision for someone else. You need to be before the Lord. What is he leading your family? I mean, if you're a person of faith following Jesus,
Yeah.
and that's a big thing in your life, then it's really important to be before the Lord with whatever decision comes with that.
So 8 kids in 10 and a half years. And just because I know the statistics on it, can I ask how many pregnancies you may have lost in that time or since as well?
After Luke, we lost a baby. That baby was due, well, it's just coming up now. Baby was due New Year's Eve, 2013. And we lost that baby. I had a subchorionic hematoma, an intrauterine bleed. So that was hard. We had an ultrasound, we saw baby moving and everything, but I had some complications, and then we ended up losing that baby. And then we lost a baby 3 years ago, had a miscarriage.
Yeah. What was the rest of the kids' reaction or response?
So when we lost the one in 2013, or it would have been 2012 that I miscarried, that because the baby was due, I think, New Year's of 2013. Boy, I'm even getting mixed up on here. No, baby must have been. You can edit this part out. Luke and that baby would have been about 3 years apart. So the kids were older, where they knew what was going on. And some of our kids, when we told them, the baby has died, because I had an ultrasound and the heartbeat was gone, baby was not living anymore. One of our kids just did a headstand off of the couch and just kind of looked around, on his head. And one of our kids, who's very sensitive, just started crying and crying. And it was actually last night we were talking about this, and she was just really crying. And she said, I just miss these 2 kids that we don't have. We could be buying them Christmas presents and it would be so fun, and we don't have them here. So everyone has processed that grief differently. And I think that's okay. Everyone does grieve that differently.
Yeah.
When we found out we were expecting 3 years ago, that was a surprise to us. And I maybe 2 days before, I was thinking, before we had told the kids, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be homeschooling till I'm 62. And yesterday was not a good day with my 12-year-old. It's just like I'm starting this again. But we were excited too, knowing each child is so unique, and what is this child going to be like?
Yeah.
But when we had told our kids that we were expecting this baby that we lost 3 years ago now, I was surprised, and my husband was too, how excited everyone was. So our oldest was around 20, and he said, are you serious? This is awesome. You guys are the best parents ever. This is so cool. And I was just thinking, I'm really surprised he's saying that. And the kids all the kids were really excited. And I thought, I'm kind of surprised, because some of them don't like sharing a bedroom with their siblings. Like, I want my own room. And now we're having another baby, and that means someone's going to share.
Yeah.
But they were all really, really excited. And then when we lost the baby, they were pretty sad, but expressed it differently in their grieving.
Right. How do your kids get along? But there's 8 of them and 10-year age difference in there.
In some ways it was easier having all 8 together than, I think, big gaps, because there was always someone to play with.
Sure.
And this friend said, your kids are like a pack of puppies. They all just pile together. There are certain combos of siblings that we knew, okay, these 2 get along really well. And those 2, we do not put next to each other on a long car trip. So I would say they all do get along pretty well. Some of them have some more spats than others, but
Yeah.
I think they're all really appreciative of their siblings.
Yeah. I think that is one thing that I noticed just as an observer of
Mm.
your family. It wasn't just like a tolerance or, there wasn't always fighting or anything like that. But speaking of traveling, how did you guys buy your own school bus? How did
No, we did not.
how
That
did
was
travel work?
discussed. Oh, so when we had, let's see, we had 5 kids, so we had a minivan that held 7. And then when we had Marcy, our 6th child, we got a minivan that held 8. But before we had that minivan, we were driving down the road one day and we saw a short school bus. And Jason and I just think he and I were together. Maybe we had one of the little kids with us. But I looked at that school bus, and we're looking at the school bus title over the windshield, and I just said, Pettis. But we did not go the school bus route. So we had a minivan that held 8 when we had 6 kids. And then when we had our 7th, we got a 9-passenger Suburban. It had the 3-row bench in the front seat, and then, 3 rows behind us, 2 rows of 3 behind us. And then when we had our 8th child, I told Jason, I will move heaven and earth to not drive a van. I do not want a van. So I called this custom place and I said, could you ever put another seat in the cargo area of a Suburban? And the receptionist said, oh yeah, Danny can do that. I thought, how do you know what Danny can do? You didn't even ask Danny. But she said, yeah, he can do that. So we had a custom seat put into the Suburban, and they told us, yeah, legally you can do this if all the hardware is attached to the seat. And so that's what we drove for several years. We had a 12-passenger Suburban.
That's
and
hilarious.
we just switched that out maybe 3 years ago.
So you're in this stage of parenting where you've got teenagers up to young adults. One of the on Instagram, I had asked what questions maybe some listeners would want to know from some moms, and this question came in that I thought of you immediately, because you have the age range 23 to 13, you've got teenagers to young adult now, all forging their own paths, making their own decisions in life right now. And the question is this: what do you do when your kids disappoint you with their choices and that's not how you raised them? So how would you navigate answering that?
When that happens, I really tried to take a step back and think, why are they making this decision? What's motivating this? Sometimes, I think of like faith decisions. If they choose a different route, what are they really actually wrestling with here? And one of our kids has made some different decisions than Jason and I have. But the questions that are being asked, we had really good conversations about it. And I just said, the questions that you have are valid questions, and they should be able to be answered, and you should be able to ask them because it's legitimate. And I don't think we can just sweep that aside and give simplistic answers. So we've really tried to see what's the heart behind it. But I also think, wow, the faithfulness of God through this, I've made a lot of decisions that I'm sure have disappointed the Lord.
Right.
But he loves me and he's not giving up on me. And I think I need the Lord's love for my kids and for our kids. So that's one thing. And there are things too. Maybe our kids are making decisions that we don't agree with because I think, what did they see in my life? Did they see some hypocrisy? Did they see something that was a turnoff to them? And just trying to look at it, from that perspective too.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I have always appreciated about you is just your openness to conversation in general. Certainly with me, you don't shy away from the tough things. If I'm a wreck crying about something, you certainly don't shy away from it or try to change the subject or anything. And I know that you foster that open conversation with your kids as well. What would you say helps that? Because maybe there are, families or mothers and children in general who, when their child approaches them about something, their immediate response is a reaction, maybe, instead of a response. So how do you foster that conversation with your kids?
I would say I really tend toward reacting more than responding.
Hmm.
And I know that. And I'm really trying to work to not do that. My husband is very much more of a responder than a reactor. And so I feel like he's been a really good encouragement to me in that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I use the word encouragement, I mean someone who instills courage, not someone who said, sometimes you hear, oh, I'm going to encourage you in this. And you don't feel encouraged after someone done encouraging you. You feel berated or something. But I would say he is really an encourager to me in that, and just trying to be quiet and hear the person fully out before I say something, which I'm not there, but working on that.
Do you find a lot of times in doing that where sometimes maybe they answer their own questions or find the answer that you would have come to anyway if you just stop and listen long enough rather than jump to responding?
I have seen that happen sometimes, and maybe the person just needs to verbally process
Sure.
what they're trying to work through.
Sure. And okay, so this is something that we haven't talked about, is homeschooling. And I bring this up first of all because you have 8 children. And a lot of times people get overwhelmed just when they hear about homeschooling in general. But I have always told myself, if Allison can do it with 8, I can do it with 2.
Word.
What led to your decision to homeschool, and what was your homeschool journey like? I mean, you're still in it, but
Yes. What led to our homeschooling journey? I was homeschooled, so I think it was a lot more natural for me to consider that option because it was not foreign. But we didn't know for sure what we would do with our kids. Jason was in public school his whole life, and I was homeschooled my whole life. So, our schooling years. So when we had, I think, our first one, we were with a family member who had a little kindergartner, and their kindergartner was doing some things that were not really appropriate. And my husband told this little 5-year-old, "Oh, don't do that, okay?" And the mom then noticed what the kid was doing and said, "Oh, when you send them to school, it's like they're not even your kid anymore." And that really, I don't know, made Jason consider, like, maybe this is a good thing to consider, homeschooling. And so that was kind of a big, I don't know, push in that direction. But we started homeschooling with our first 2, and just the way their birthdays fell, we started them both and their development, we started them both in kindergarten together. And we thought, we'll take this year by year. And so we have done that. And some now of our kids have done different types of schooling. Some have done some classes in the public school. We're in Minnesota, and in Minnesota, there's a program where you can do dual enrollment, basically, and your junior and senior years paid for, college is paid for by the state. So we've had our kids do a lot of those classes. So they're earning college credit in 11th and 12th grade. So we've done some of that. We've done some high school classes at the local public high school. One of our kids this year is in a Christian school. So it's just depended on the kid, their learning style, kind of what their social needs seem to be, what their social temperament is, and kind of their interests. We can't have orchestra at our house, a very great orchestra program, but Moorhead Public Schools has a phenomenal orchestra program with amazing instructors, and we have just felt like we've been so blessed to have those teachers in our kids' lives.
Yeah. Do you think that you have enough people to have a really cool family band? I know the talent is there.
Some of our kids will sit down and play instruments together, and they really enjoy it. The really cool family band, I don't know how that would go. Depends who's in it.
So with that large number of children and homeschooling and living in Minnesota, which has, I'm just going to say, really long winters, what kinds of things would you do for fun? Are you guys a board game family? How did that work, keeping sanity all at home together, and especially over those long winter months?
That's a great question. Several of us, I would say, like maybe our two oldest kids, and Jason and I love board games, and our younger kids don't as much. So I'm trying to remember, some of that I just don't remember. You're just in the thick of it.
Yeah.
They'd do some games. They would play the Wii.
Yeah.
They played outside. Um, if it was cold out, put on some more scarves or something.
Yeah.
Time to go outside. We did have neighbor kids too, quite a few neighbor kids, and so the kids would play outside quite a bit with neighbors.
Yeah. And even though winters are long, they're not entirely miserable. So playing outside
Right.
is certainly something. I have, at one point, Haley said that she was born for winter. She was made for this. She doesn't say that anymore, but she would play outside for hours and hours, just, building little snow caves, but not so much anymore as a 13-year-old. What is feeding your family of 10 like?
Oh, yeah, people ask that. It just seems like it becomes more, it's just part of what we do. That's not a great answer to that question. Feeding our family of 10.
Are you picky about the kinds of things that you cook? What kind of meals do you make? Do you despise shopping and cooking all the time?
No, I don't despise it. It's hard to come up with things sometimes when there's certain kids who don't like certain foods, but I guess our kids always had to try something when they were little. I don't think we have super picky eaters, except we do say that our youngest is because he's the youngest. We eat a lot of taco soup. If I make taco meat and there's leftover taco meat, that's easy to make into a taco soup. We do leftovers. I try to make, bigger batches of things, and then we can eat it 1 or 2 more meals. Sandwiches. Now it's so different because our kids, really, we only have one full-time homeschooling at home.
Yeah.
And my husband works from home. So sometimes it's just 3 of us at home. And that's a big difference, from 10 years ago.
Right.
So most of the kids know how to prepare food. And sometimes if they have to eat on their own, they'll make their own meal. Now it's just shifted into kind of a different phase than it used to be. But I don't know, as far as pickiness, everyone always had to try something. If it made you ill, then you didn't have to eat it. But otherwise, don't complain. This is what there is.
How many pounds of ground beef does it take to make tacos for 10 people?
I've tried to figure that out. Well, it depends, because if you're doing like tacos in a bag, you don't need as much as if you're filling tortillas.
Oh, sure. Sure.
If I'm cooking for everyone, probably I would do 4 pounds of ground beef.
Yeah.
But then do we have beans to go with it? Or how many more things do we have to put in tacos? So we don't like to run out of food.
Yeah.
So I usually just make a bunch and then I'll put the leftovers in the fridge.
Yeah. And what are holidays like with your family and Jason's family, and then your kids? Do you have different holiday schedules? Do you do it year by year? What do holidays look like?
So now it's getting to be more year by year. But we did when we first got married, we agreed that we'd do Christmas with Jason's family and Thanksgiving with my family. And that's worked really well over the years. My family has lived farther away, so we haven't always done holidays with them. And Jason's parents are just 5 hours away from us, so that's easier to connect
Mm.
with them. So I think every Christmas we've done Christmas with Jason's parents and his sisters if they've been close enough in the country to get together. And Thanksgiving with my family, generally that's our first plan. Unless they can't get together, then we'll get together maybe with Jason's family or neighbors or friends.
Are your kids close with their cousins?
Let's see. Sort of, but not super close. I mean, none of the cousins really have lived very close, except now we do have 3 cousins who are quite a bit younger in town.
Mm. So that leads me to another question then on age. With, Tim is 23. Do your older kids mentor your younger kids at all? Like talking about, life choices, things that don't make sense. Is there any sort of that mentorship, like, you don't want to do that, you don't want to make that mistake, and here's why? Or
Yes, there is.
There is.
And that's been good. We've had some of our younger kids making some decisions that Jason and I didn't think were very great decisions. But we told our older kids, I said, listen, they're going to talk to you. And you got to tell them, you've got to tell them the right thing because they're not going to hear it from us right now. So that's been cool to see how our younger kids do have a good relationship with the older ones. And the older ones sometimes will just tell it to them really straight, and I think sometimes there's a relationship with siblings that's unlike other relationships so often. And I'm not sure what is the magic sauce of that. And I know everyone doesn't have that, but so often there is that. There was something that had come up and I was surprised. Someone was picking at one of our kids and one of their siblings said, they can't say that about you. I said, well, you say that about them all the time. Why are you upset that someone else is? Well, I can say it, but nobody else can. So they really came to the defense of their sibling and something that they always picked at that person for anyway. So
sure.
They do have a good relationship with their older siblings and they can ask them things, or sometimes they probably get unsolicited advice too.
Yeah. And when your kids are going through, any kind of trial, or maybe they are facing a decision and not sure what to do you direct them to talk to a certain sibling at some point? Like, your brother had face the same situation. You should see what he thought about it.
I think sometimes that has come up. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would be surprised if through 8 children there weren't some similar situations and circumstances that maybe were even recurring.
Yes. Well, one that's kind of in this phase of life now is college. What do I do for college? And how do I pick a college? And how do I pick a degree? And sometimes that can be pretty daunting for someone. And I know one of our kids, Olivia, before she had gone to college and she was trying to figure out what she wanted to do, she kind of teared up one day, and she's a very quiet person, but she just said it's really overwhelming, and her eyes were a little watery. And so I thought, this is really affecting her a lot if her eyes water. She said it's really overwhelming because there are so many choices. And some of our younger kids have said that too. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I'm a senior and I have to make this decision and I don't know what to do. I said, Olivia had that same struggle and you could ask her about that, or, just, she can relate to, relaying that to the kids. Like, yep, this is a challenge and she's faced this too.
Yeah. So Allison, what did you do to catch your breath, to clear your head in the midst of mothering?
What comes to mind is nap time.
For you or the kids or both?
Everyone. There was a part, I don't remember what phase it was, but I just thought I am tired. I feel like I'm losing it here. I said to the kids one school year, and I don't remember which year this was, but I just said, listen, we need to have an hour of quiet time after lunch. You don't have to sleep. You may get books and just lie on your bed, but I need it to be quiet for 1 hour. And I am an extrovert and I really like being with people and I enjoy having a lot of kids, but there is a point where it's just, I mean, I can't keep up with everything and I just needed a little bit of downtime.
Mm-hmm. And what about um when you have that downtime, what about maintaining your household just in general, like with the laundry and the clean? I still remember the story. It's one of my favorite stories that you shared about the downstairs bathroom
Oh
when you
my
had
goodness.
company. Like how do you manage your home with people always in it and using it?
So what do you mean by manage? If we could
Let's
just get
define that.
get a definition on this. Our kids do debate, so let's define what this word manage.
Okay, how do you, for instance, for myself personally, physical clutter causes mental clutter. So today I texted you even like I came into the office to do some work and I just had to wipe the whole desk off, take everything off of it, clean it, and set everything back again. And in fact, after I was finished, Brent and I share this office. And after I was finished cleaning my desk, he turned to me and said, "Can my mess overwhelm you now?" Wanted me to clean his desk too, but
Oh.
so for me, like it reaches a point where it
Mhm.
has to be dealt with, and it has to be dealt with right then. Is that the same for you with 10 people in your house?
I would say it did not used to affect me like that. I think it is more now where it's bothering me. But when the kids were little, I was trying to do some different housekeeping methods and I thought, I'm trying to keep up with this and this is all that I'm doing as I'm
Yeah.
working on these cards, getting my cards done, getting my cleaning cards and I wasn't being very nice to the kids. And I thought,
Mm.
I don't want my whole day spent on, okay, I only have 5 left to go. Don't play with that toy anymore. Get out of the way. I'm going to clean it up. And so I just thought it's either be clean or be happy. I can't
Hmm.
do both.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, we didn't just let everything run amok, but that was not my focus of trying to keep everything clean and tidy. But I mean, honestly, that's been a struggle because I do have friends who you walk in and their house looks like Better Homes and Gardens and they have a lot of kids. And I stayed up the whole night cleaning my house and I'm like, I went to bed. My house is a mess and I feel good. um, so I don't know if that's a personality difference.
I wonder because I have tried to tell myself the same. Like you,
Mm-hmm.
Valerie, you're just going to have to deal with the mess because I don't want to just constantly nag at my children and remind them like, why do you just drop things where you are when you're done with
Mm-hmm.
them? Like that doesn't make sense to me. And so I've tried to tell myself like I can either be okay with the mess or be anal retentive about maintaining, and I haven't struck a balance
Yeah, I don't
there.
feel like I have either. I mean, I did tell you that story that one time about how our bathroom, to sum it up, was not in a presentable condition, really, for anyone to use. And one of the church pastors was over and used it when it was in that state. But, came back the next week too for Bible study, so it was fine.
Right, right.
So I don't feel like I've ever hit a great stride with that. But I think
Yeah,
the Lord knows where I am with that. I want to be faithful with what I have, and I don't want to just say, I'm not a clean person, so I'm not going to work on that. But
yeah,
also, I don't think my value is in that either.
yeah.
So,
I struggle with walking the line of teaching my children the responsibility of of self-care and of picking up after themselves and of respect for their father and I,
Mm-hmm.
because that's our living space too. And also the line of just not throttling them because I have to tell them 27 times to, like, your math book does not go on the sofa.
Yes. Yes. And I think part of this too is, how is your spouse with it? You know, if it really were stressful on Jason or on me to have it messy, like, how do we work that to have harmony in our home?
Mm,
So I think that's important too.
yeah. You mentioned that you were an extrovert, and you mentioned briefly about hosting Bible study. What is it like inviting people over in your home and there's already 10 of you there to begin with? Do other people get overwhelmed, or is it just a fun time? I can tell you what
Well,
I think it would
I'm
be.
pretty sure it's probably both. I mean, if people are overwhelmed, then maybe they just shouldn't come back. Um, it seems like people have enjoyed coming over to our house, but I don't feel like we have a huge house, but I don't think hospitality is the size of your home.
Right. Right.
So I remember this when I was growing up. We had some friends who, there was just my brother. My brother and I were the only kids in our family, but we had some good friends who had 6 kids, and they were pretty poor. They didn't have a high income. But if you stopped at their house and they were eating a meal, I mean, some of their carpeting was worn down. It was threadbare.
Mm,
Their table shook when you bumped it. Who knew if the chair was actually going to stay together when you sat in it at the dining room table? Their house was fun. And if you showed up at a meal, they said, sit down, and everybody scooted down the table, here's a plate for you. And they just welcomed you in. And I think that's hospitality.
right. I love that. And that's an important thing to remember too. And again, if you foster that hospitable environment, it really shouldn't matter how many people are there, but the hearts of all of them around
Yes.
that table. Yeah. So Allison, as we wrap up here, what advice or encouragement would you give to other moms who are just starting out and not sure? They feel like the Lord is calling them to a big family, but they're not sure what that entails, or
Mhm.
how they would even handle more children than what they've got. What would you say to them?
Wow, I never felt like I could really handle it either. So, people have said to me, "How do you do it all?" I say, "I don't."
Right. Right.
I guess I pray for the Lord's wisdom. I want to be faithful with what He's given me and walk one day at a time. I mean, that can sound kind of cliche. Some days you're running up the hill, and other days you're clawing your way up the hill. But God is faithful through all of this, and He's good in all things. And I think about those times when you think that you didn't have it together. Some good friends were short-term missions for a year in Bolivia. And I remember one thing they said. They said, when we did this short-term mission trip, we were not the ideal family to do this because we had 6 kids. We were older and we didn't know the language, but they really felt like God was leading them to this place. And so they went, and he said the 3 things that were weaknesses turned out to be real strengths God used. Because we were older, we had been through a lot of hard things in life, and we could counsel others and do some marriage counseling, things like this. Our 6 kids, God used the kids to expand our social connections so much more, because we had, your kids are involved in things and you meet a lot more people. And then the third thing he said, the language barrier, because we couldn't speak the language, people in the church really had to rise up and become stronger leaders and not just rely on the missionaries who came in. And that matured a lot of them. And I thought that's really cool when we, in our weaknesses, no one says, oh, I'd like this weakness or this trial to show forth the Lord's greatness.
Yeah.
But God can use those things, and sometimes they're really difficult. But God is good, and He's faithful through it. So just asking Him to lead us through these things, and we see that He is good through it all.
I think there is no better note to end this conversation on. Allison, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm sure that you have lots of motherhood experience we can unpack, so maybe we'll have to do a repeat appearance.
Okay, well, thank you, Val, and I appreciate you chatting with me here.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head on over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.